Okay, I just want to go over some black and white conversion options for you in Photoshop. So I'll cover a few different options in this little video. Some are destructive, some are non-destructive, and more customizable, if you like. So I've made this kind of test image here, which is a color wheel, which is really useful because it shows you what it does to the underlying colors. Um, a portrait image. This is from Unsplash, by the way. So these are free images, stock images, and another one from Unsplash. So a couple of scenarios and showing you different color options. So um, the first options I'll show you. So I'm going to use the underlying layer. I'm going to hit Command J to copy the layer up because I'm going to use a destructive way of making a black and white conversion. And the reason that we kind of want you to work with a color image to create black and white images is because you get flexibility. Your cameras will be able to do it on their own, but they pick the sort of luminosity values that are selected for each of the different colors in the image. If you retain your color information and then use Photoshop to tweak it, you have the complete flexibility to change lots of things. And we'll see that as we go along. So to show you a couple of destructive ways of doing it and really sort of blunt ways, if you hit image, you can hit mode. And the really blunt way of doing it is to change the mode. This is the type of image we're working with to grayscale. And this, if you hit OK, it'll discard layers. I don't really mind about that because I'm going to be able to step back. Now that makes it into a grayscale image. It basically takes all the color information away from the image and converts it to a black and white image. Now, there's no flexibility in that. You do not get to choose any values or how the image looks. It's actually made a reasonable job of this, but not fantastic. But that essentially changes your whole document type to just have tonal values. So not RGB values, not red, green, blue, but it has grayscale values. Okay, so we don't want to do that. So I'm going to hit Command Z and we'll go back into that color space. The mode here is RGB back to red, green, blue. Okay, so that's a really blunt way of doing it. It just removes the color information and sort of retains the luminosity values of each channel and combines them. Okay. Another sort of destructive way of doing it is you can go into adjustments. Now we looked at adjustments before, and as I said, these are things that will change the pixels on the layer that you have active. Okay. So within here, you have lots of different options. You could do something like hue saturation, okay? And all you do is you take the saturation out of your image, okay? Really simple and blunt. If you applied that, that's changed that layer completely, and it's destructive. So you can step back. So I could do Command Z to go back, but again, no flexibility, and it's changed those pixels completely if you retain it. Excuse me, with all of these adjustments here, you have a black and white filter. Now this gives you flexibility, but it locks it into a layer, okay? And if you see, this is where it starts to get interesting, where you've got options to change specific color values in your image. You can start to really tweak your image. Now, again, this is a destructive process, but you can use an adjustment layer in the same way, okay? So the one in particular that will be quite dramatic here, you can choose a color value. So it'll choose the colors, select the colors in that image. And think of these sliders like luminosity, brightness or darkness, okay? So if you look at her dress in particular in the middle, it's a red dress. So I can make that dress a white dress by simply pushing the luminosity value. And if you keep going, it would get a bit crazy, but you could also make it a dark dress, a black dress, and it will move it depending on where you put the slider. Okay, so what this allows you to do is to have ultimate control over your tonal contrasts in your image. So if you see the color wheel, you can see how things are changing on the left, and then you can see it reflected in the image on the right hand side. So the image on the right in particular has a fair amount of greens, or you would think so. So when I move the green slider, you can see certain elements of the image getting darker or lighter. Okay. But funnily enough, it actually has mostly yellows in it. If you look at it, when you change the slider, you can really, really start to tweak things. Now, with something like a landscape where you're converting things to black and white, you have total flexibility with this. So the sky would be blue. Okay, you've maybe seen Ansel Adams images and the sky's black. Well, he's used a red filter to cut out the blue rays, so it makes skies black, and you can do that within this filter here. Okay, so you could pull your skies to be this dramatic sort of black, or you could push it the other way and make them look much, much brighter. Okay, so you can work with these sliders, and you can see the reflected thing happening on the left hand side to the color wheel. So that gives you an idea of what you're actually pushing and pulling. And you can see, so if I've got the green slider, obviously this element here is the green. Luminosity of minus 200 or plus 200 would go up to sort of white or bright. Pull it down, it goes the opposite way. And you can see the resultant change in an image on the right hand side. Okay. When you're working with skin tones or with when there's people in the image, just be aware, depending if they've got Caucasian skin or darker skin, this will obviously change. But a lot of Caucasian skin has yellows and reds in it, okay, in varying degrees. So you can kind of increase and decrease contrast levels, but it will have a pretty major effect on Caucasian skin. So you need to kind of be aware of that. Also, you can push and pull these things to quite a greater or lesser extent, but it starts to create a little bit of banding if you push them really heavily. You can also hit auto and it'll make a best guess. Okay, so that is where the flexibility comes in for black and white conversions. But if I hit OK, again, that's destructive. That's made that layer a black and white layer. But we'll switch it off, and then I'll show you the more sensible ways of doing it. Now I'll just delete out these layers because I was working on this earlier. So I showed you the layers palette and how that's the power of Photoshop. Well, here we have all the same adjustments as we saw up on the left here. But the flexibility in these is that they are not applying it to any layer, just the layer that's visible below it. Okay, so a few different ways of doing black and white conversions. We can use the black and white filter. Again, we have access to these sliders, and it gives us a proper flexibility on your tonal values and luminosity values. And again, it can be switched on and switched off. And you can also paint onto your mask. So say you wanted to somehow reduce the black and white effect, you could use a black brush. If I hit X to change the brush here, I'm going to bring my brush opacity down to 15%. Now, if I start to paint into that, basically what you're getting is 15% of the color opacity of the color. So it's reduced the color value. So if you really want to bring an image to quite muted tones, quite reduced kind of saturations, you can use a black and white layer like this. And then if you paint over it a little bit more, it brings a little bit more into the image. So you can see those greens are too punchy now, I think. And then it actually gives a really nice, subtle kind of look to things. Okay. Similarly, if I wanted to paint in here, if you wanted just a very muted, pastel-y kind of image, you could have a black and white layer over the top, take your brush and paint it into the mask so that you're only getting a percentage of the color coming through from the black and white layer. Okay, so it gives you massive amounts of flexibility. So that black and white layer is very similar to this one, but it gives you the flexibility of having a mask as an option. Okay, so I'm going to switch that off. I'm going to show you another couple of these. There is something in here that is called Channel Mixer. Nope, tell a lie, that's not the one I was wanting to select. It's called Gradient Map. Where are we? There we go. Okay, so the default, or the one that I maybe used last, is this weird and wonderful gradient. This has a sort of selection of gradients underneath. So just double click this little gradient, and you get these options, or yours might look slightly different, but you should have a black and white version. Okay, so from white to black. And that does a reasonable job of making a black and white conversion. It does a decent job. But if you want flexibility, what you need to do is you need to add what we call a control point to this gradient. So click on the gradient, and again, it's went for this weird red color. Double click the little square, and on here, you've got your color values. Top to bottom's luminosity. Right to left is saturation. Okay, so saturated here, unsaturated here. And what you want to do is use a mid-gray, so somewhere in between top and bottom without any color. Hit OK. And then what you have here is a way of pushing and pulling your image to maybe lighten and brighten it, flatten it out a little bit, or I quite like it going the other way, giving it a quite moody, heavy feel to it. And if you hit OK, so say you find that that's maybe giving a nice sort of dark feel to it, but it's not quite what you want. You can actually pull out, same idea, just pull out a little bit of the effect, and it just gives you an option to, if you're using an opacity slider like a filter, an effects filter, you can reduce your opacity, so you could have 50% saturation based on that color value. So you can take color values out, and you can see how it mutes the color wheel and gives you those values. So that's one other option that you're looking at. Let me just also show you a bit of a trick. If you change your what we call the blending mode, so this layer selected, blending mode to screen, let's go to the black and white layer. So here, what I want to do is I can then use these color sliders as a way of controlling the color values in the image below. So I could actually use these to make darker and lighter the colors. So you can use a black and white layer as a luminosity channel. It's a bit more advanced than what you guys need to know about, but you can use that if it's on screen to dictate how the bottom layer color-wise, individual color-wise, is represented. Okay, so that's probably a bit beyond your level just now. See here, so it's just a demo. If I push and pull the green channel, you can see its luminosity values going up and down selectively. If I use the yellow channel, I can pull up or push down those yellows luminosity wise. And then her red dress, look at her red dress up and down. So it acts like a sort of filter for individual colors as well. So it can be a really useful thing. Okay, so I'll just delete out that channel. And that's the adjustment layer. So I'm just going to bin that. So gradient map's an option. And again, I used the opacity slider, and let's put it back to normal, to reduce the effect and maybe bring some color back in. So let's bin that as well. The last one we want to show you is your channel mixer. And again, you can use this and you can change different elements of it. So let's set it to monochrome. It's a little tick box to say monochrome. And this allows you to change your luminosity again of individual channels. So you can move your red, green, and blue around, and it will give you different sort of looks and feels. Okay. You can also use it to choose black and white filters, as if you were using old school filters in the front of your lens to give you kind of different looks. Okay. So there's a few different ways of non-destructively and destructively creating black and white conversions. I will put this image, this test image, up on Teams and on OneNote. It's a really good way of seeing what the black and white conversion is doing to your image. Okay, and how you style or how you make your black and white conversions is kind of up to your aesthetic choice, if you like. But this gives you a way of a bit more understanding of that. And we'll go over this in class so you guys get a sort of live demo of it as well. Okay, that's that for today.